Gastone heaved the 40 pounds of compost from the back of his truck to the little shelter where patrons could purchase the rich soil for their gardens. He was worn out after a full morning of unloading the bags from the big semi to his truck. This was one of the products they sold that they didn't actually produce themselves on the farm. The compost soil, the eggs from the Amish farm, and the canned goodies like salsa and spaghetti sauce that the old woman Martha cooked down the street. She'd give them canned goods to sell and she'd make a profit, which was much needed for her. The farm had been in Gastone's family for several generations, and he was the youngest one involved with a small organic farm. The only reason they made money was because they sold to the public, and their produce was a novelty, being a small farm in the world of big grocery stores and big mass production farms. It was a flash of the past that many glommed onto, and they profited as a result. Local people liked buying from them because they were family-run. The food was organic and fresh, and they loved the atmosphere because they also had a petting zoo of sorts with goats, sheep, chickens, and a few cows. There weren't many farms like them around, so the local neighborhoods would flock to them and buy produce they grew that was way overpriced, but no one cared. Everyone loved coming to the farm for fun and their families, then taking home fresh, beautiful fruits and veggies. They kept expanding and hired a woman named Olga to help them cook food and freeze it. Olga worked in the farmhouse every day, cooking foods and freezing them to fill the deep freeze inside the small store at the center of the farm. No one lived in the farmhouse anymore. It served as headquarters for the farm, housed the offices for his aunts, uncles, and parents. He was the workhorse of the farm, along with all of his cousins. Olga was Gastone's dream of a woman. Big, juicy, that bounced when she laughed. The laughter always reaching her eyes, and sparks of delight would radiate out of her, making her even more appealing to Gastone than just her appearance alone. How a woman could be so jovial, kind, and sexy at once flabbergasted Gastone. Olga was one of those women that men instantly liked, and many women instantly disliked. Perhaps she was too pretty and kind, and they compared themselves to her, knowing they'd never come as close to amazing as Olga Sventgarden did. She was like a fantasy Gastone had dreamt up in bed late at night. Sleep was not a thing, but he always knew he'd conk out to thoughts of Olga. She could say anything to him, and he was transfixed as if caught in a magic spell. He'd truly last listening to her read to tell stories for an entire morning, which was pretty long to Gastone, who didn't like to sit still. He was a mover and a doer, always working on something. Today on the farm, he had to stock the compost bags, which no one else wanted to ever do, so he always volunteered because hefting 40-pound bags was as good as lifting at the gym any day, so it meant his evening would be free because he'd be getting his workout done in the workday. Once he was done with that, he would need to tend to the animals. Then he was to help his girl cousins pick the ripe strawberries. Picking the strawberries at peak ripeness was always a challenge because they all came ripe at the same time and needed to be picked quickly before they rotted on the vines. The strawberries were one of the biggest moneymakers of the farm, however, so no one ever complained much. Gastone hoped he'd get to bring the batches of berries that were to go to Olga, so he could ogle her body as she'd most likely try to talk his ear off in the 5 minutes he'd be in the kitchen with her. He needed to ask her out, and today seemed like the perfect day to do it.